So, it's time to answer the questions that $3 supporters had in the month of June. If you'd like to ask a question for July, just follow the links below to either Patreon or Subscribestar, become a supporter at the $3 level, and comment on the latest AMA post. We'll start with Josh Havins, who asks, do you believe planned obsolescence is actually a thing? No, not in the way people usually mean it. I have a quickie on this. The idea is that greedy corporations make products with a sort of self-destruct device, forcing you to buy another one after a certain period of time. What they're observing is an effect of a rapidly progressing economy. 100 years ago, you only had to buy one kitchen table and it lasted a lifetime. They just don't make them like that anymore. Well, actually they do, and if you're willing to fork out the money, you can get one. But back then, tables had to last a lifetime because that was pretty much the only one you were going to get. But nowadays, few people are willing to spend that much, so we get a table that's good enough that lasts for the few years you're going to use it before wanting to buy a new one. Constantly being able to refresh with a new product is a sign of a wealthy economy. It also happens when technology is progressing. Originally, TVs were a piece of furniture. Because they were so expensive, they figured you were only going to buy one and that was it. Now, a TV is something that you put into an entertainment center, and you usually buy a new one every few years because of improving technology. HD, 4K, wider screens, smart TVs, TVs with better color, and so on. Make it an expensive piece of furniture, and the poor get left behind. Another thing people point to is things like warranties and support. They'll only support a phone that's a few years old, or software a version or two back. But that's because it's a lot cheaper for them to support just a few different versions than hire the support personnel for older versions that few people have anymore. And no one's going to want to pay the higher price if the companies have to provide that level of support. So no, there's no self-destruct. There's no planned obsolescence. It's a wealthy economy. Enjoy it. Ali Adeeb asks, Mississippi had Republican political leadership for a long time. What do you say to liberals and progressives that say, if economic freedom works well, then why is Mississippi poor? I know it's not a totally free state, but I'm sure it's economically free relative to blue states at least. Well, there are lots of reasons and it's quite a bit to unpack. One is a mix-up of cause and effect. It's because they're so poor that they don't want to support politicians who are going to tax the life out of them. And they also see through the Democrats' rhetoric to be the friend of the working class and helping the poor and all that crap. I've covered over and over on this channel why that's a crock, and people aren't stupid. Socialists tend to be spoiled rich brats. Another is the fact that the big divide in our country is city versus rural. Notice how Democrats want to make it so that the cities are in charge of everything. That holds true on the federal level too. So the states with the higher city populations like California end up plowing over the states with larger rural populations like Mississippi. All sorts of policies from minimum wage to labor laws make it so that it's harder for people in rural areas to find work and to start their own business. And despite claims that we need all these big federal programs so that the rich states can help the poor states, we see things like, for example, more federal education dollars going to blue states when the number of pupils are figured in. Another is the effect being exaggerated. When you look at the poverty statistics, it just sets the poverty rate at one level across the board and lumps everyone in the country into the same categories and quintiles. But in red states like Mississippi, it's not just incomes that are lower, it's the cost of living too. Red states actually have a higher standard of living relative to housing costs. And those last 2 points go together. Say they pass a $15 federal minimum wage. While people in states like California with a high cost of living might like it, what's going to happen in states with lower costs of living? Instead of being able to find a job at $8 or $10 an hour, which might give you a comparable standard of living, those jobs are now made illegal. Not only that, but these states have different types of economies as well. Red states tend to be more agricultural, with family and middle-sized farms as well as industrial centers. Blue states tend to be more commercial and service-oriented, and the farms they have are huge and heavily corporatized. Also, isn't it interesting that red states generally don't have as much of a problem with things like the homeless population as blue states like California? So all of that means that it may not even be fair to do a direct comparison. Finally, Tomasz Urbański asks, observation. Huge majority of arguments against capitalism that circulate over the internet can be summed up to, let's blame an economic system for the failure of my own culture. Despite those two are mostly orthogonal. Honestly, in case of neoliberalism, the most common argument against it I've heard, casually repeated I should add, is it's a political doctrine that doesn't provide meaning to life. Do you disagree? Agree? Any additional thoughts? Well, neither does a recipe for lemon custard, so what? That's not what it's for! Economics, like all sciences, are descriptive, not prescriptive. They tell you how the world works, and they can help predict what might happen as a result of a policy, but they can't, don't, and shouldn't provide any moral guide as to what is the right thing to do. I've pointed this out several times. One of the reasons why the Democrat con works as well as it does is that it claims to be in favor of things that everybody's in favor of, such as a higher standard of living for the poor. Which is why they have to also take the extra step of saying that everyone else is against it. Not like good people like you and me. But the question is, can you increase the standard of living for the poor with, say, a $15 national minimum wage? All of the theoretical, empirical, and observational data says you can't. A $15 minimum destroys jobs for the very people it's supposed to help. Economics doesn't say, and therefore it's a bad thing. Only that if that's your goal, you can't achieve it that way. It's the same kind of crap that creationists say about evolution, how it doesn't provide for any meaning or morality or whatever. But that's not why it exists. It exists to answer questions about how the world works. Anyone who pretends otherwise is someone you should be very wary of. Well, that's it for the June questions. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell, and leave comments for the Common God and shares for the Share Throne, and help keep this channel going by visiting donate.bogosity.tv and giving what you can, even if it's just a few cents of crypto. Or you can get all of these same videos over at odyssey.com and donate with a crypto tip there. We'll see you next time. Until then, stay strong and be free.